I work for the National Drought Mitigation Center here at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. The National Drought Mitigation Center, even though it's national, the U.S. National Drought Mitigation Center, we are working also internationally, so many activities, specifically on drought. So what I'm going to present today is, can I get the clicker? Oh, here it is. There you go. What I'm going to present today, to just share the experience and what the activities, a couple of things. And one is strategic management, drought risk management. I don't see, I think it's cut, and can you fix that? Anyway, I'll continue discussing about that. And so what we have done is two things. And one is that we tried to develop a strategic framework for drought risk management for Africa. And also, in order to implement that, we have used, we are doing research on drought monitoring tools and drought prediction tools, so that we can also do this the same thing for Africa. So what I'm going to present to you today, now that's right, I think. Not really, but it's okay. The idea of this strategic framework development came up about 3 years ago, and we put together, when I say we, the National Drought Mitigation Center, Mark Sebeboda, the current NDMC director, Mike Hayes, Cody Knudsen, and also Don Wilhite, we have put together, and in addition to that, the international scientists from FAO, Mohamed Baza in particular, and also WMO, Bob Stefanski, have also contributed to this. And what we did is actually we developed a strategic document, a white paper that's presented over 300 people in Windhoek, Namibia in August 2016. So I presented that, I was leading this effort, and then after that, it is presented at the African Union Ministers meeting, so that that can be taken to the Africa level, and they can also try to implement it at the continental level for Africa, as well as for different nations. So that's what I'm going to highlight in this presentation. Yeah, and in this actually, what's the main difference between the developing countries and developed countries when we consider the drought issue is not only the economic loss that we would have, and it's also costs human lives in millions. And here you can see West Africa, Sahel region, for example, in 1970 to 84, the Sahelian drought killed more than 100,000 people. And North Africa, the same recently, from 1999 to 2007, and drought affected Algeria, the northern African part. Greater Horn of Africa, the frequent recurrent drought is really killing millions of people. For example, about 70 million people live in areas prone to extreme food shortage and recurrent drought. And 18 million people were suffering from food shortage during the drought peak in early 2006. And more recently, 2015 also had also impacted millions of people. Southern Africa, also the same thing in 2002, 2013, and 15, drought was recurrent and also caused and affecting millions of people. And as I said, actually, the drought has a big fatality, especially in Africa. And if you see here in this table, in 1983, 150,000 people in Sudan only, and 300,000 people were dead because of drought or the drought impact. And so this is really serious. And this is actually put together by International Disaster Database that we have collected. It could be even more than that, unaccounted for. And so the actual total, I think, could have been even higher. So this shows really drought, especially in Africa, is a very critical issue and also a moral issue as well. The recent drought actually WFP put shows for the world. And if you can notice here, more than 50% of the people affected because of drought are from Africa. How about the future? We saw drought is recurrent and it's affecting and killing millions of people. And then the recent drought also shows millions of people are affected and dying. And how about the future? And most of the climate change models, global climate change models, shows us the project an increase in drought frequency and severity in Africa and in many parts of the world as well. So this shows that it is really a critical issue and something should be done about it. And what is that something? We have to address this the disaster, specifically drought, in particular that has also a big impact on Africa because most of the agriculture is rain-fed, and the failure of any season, rainy season, would affect the food security as well. And therefore, we have to address this. Generally, what's been done by tradition is the crisis management. When drought happens, everyone will address that and try to do something about it. And after the drought is over, and then it will be stopped. No activities would be done by the governments and other officials. So that's in 80s, Don Wilhite, who is the founder of the National Drought Mitigation Center. And I was fortunate also, he was my principal advisor when I was doing my PhD about 20 years ago. He advocated this, the paradigm shift from crisis to risk management. That means instead of just addressing drought issues when it comes or it happens, but planning it and in order to mitigate and reduce the impact of drought. This is very important, not only for Africa or anywhere, but more so because of the fatalities. I think Africa should really give a big emphasis. And so that was the reason, one of the reasons we really emphasized in that workshop in 2016 for the African experts, farmers, and also the ministers and the policymakers who were presented at that meeting. So we need to have a strategy in order to address this. And the question is, can we build a strong partnership? And can we get some innovative financial solution in order to address this? And most importantly, is there any leadership which is really grassrooted from within than just pushing from the outside? So what we try to address in this document is we try to see the past, the present, and also, as I showed you, considering the impact of climate change into the future, try to see that. More importantly, we try to see the challenges that Africa would have in order to do this, to map out the strategy or build a strategic framework. One is not given a proper priority. Drought mostly is not given a priority until it happens. And so relying on the crisis management is the most countries what they are doing still. There are some progress these days like Kenya, Ethiopia, who are trying to address a risk management aspect of this, to address drought issues, but it's not there yet. So we need, at the nation level, as well as for the continental level, some kind of mapping out strategy so that we each countries can also help each other. The other one is the role of women in drought risk management is very limited. Of course, we know that there are so many progresses now we are seeing in Africa. For example, in Ethiopia, now 50% of the ministers are women, which is really great, but in most cases, the management from the below, we don't see the participation of women as much as it should be. So that gap should be closer. And also, because of this drought, people are migrating. And sometimes those people, those drought-prone areas, the water level is maybe after some few centimeters below below the ground. And it's possible to dig in and get that and use that. But there should be some kind of planning and a strategy to do that. And of course, there should be also investment to that. So, in fact, there are the lack of financial resources, but that also should be addressed. And mostly in developing countries, in particular in Africa, I can say, they are waiting help from the outside. But the help should start from within. And so that the outside also could help out so that, and address the solution. So in addition to that, as I mentioned, the climate change is exacerbating the frequency of drought, the severity of drought, and so those things really need a strategy, and of course, not only just a document, also implementing those strategies. So these are the 3 pillars of integrated drought risk management, which is the idea originated from Don Wilhite and the National Drought Mitigation Center. We have scientist colleagues who really developed this idea, and not only within the nation, also internationally. For example, WMO has adopted this to be implemented in different countries all over in the world. So we base this as the starting issue for strategic development of drought risk management for Africa. And these are the drought monitoring and early warning systems. I can highlight some of the tools that we are doing research and trying to develop. Drought vulnerability and impact assessment is another pillar which is very important, and also drought mitigation and response. These are the 3 pillars that should be addressed in order to build drought risk management. So what we did actually is we have tried to adopt that 3 pillars and also try to make some kinds of emphasis on these pillars. And that's why we have added 3 elements that you can see here in the green color. And one is, for example, policies and government for drought risk management. And this is just very, very important. And the other one is reducing underlying factors of the drought risk management, like for the role of women that I was mentioning. That really should be emphasized, and the elderly, and the indigenous knowledge, and that's the other element also. And also just giving the planning and preparedness for drought at the early stage for the youngsters, probably if not elementary school, at least high school and in the universities. This should be advocated and given so that it would inculcate in the minds of the young people and use that for decision making down the road. So the idea is we have this strategic framework that we have done, and in this actually the center here that I forgot to mention is the African countries themselves, because it is a continental kind of umbrella organization. And African Union can give leadership. And the UN agencies like FAO, WFP, WMO, these also can contribute. And also we do have in Africa regional entities, regional institutes that are really dealing with climate prediction as well as climate information. And so we can link this together so that they can produce an integrated kind of product that could be helpful for decision makers to plan and prepare for drought. That means before drought happens. So the other thing is innovative financial solutions. That's very important. And of course, there is no money. And I just tried to mention a little bit. For example, Ethiopia should start from its own. The government might not have a lot of money, but they have to start with whatever they have and show the seriousness of that program. And if they invest in it, and then the UN agencies could help, regional agencies could help, and other developed countries also can help. That's the way it should be sustained. Otherwise, just getting help wouldn't be the best thing for sustainable development. And the African leadership is very important. And in fact, we do have a lot of challenges in a democratic election, but things are changing now for good, I think. And so this African leadership and really is very important in order to implement this strategy. And a strong partnership with the developed countries as well as the UN agencies and national and international experts are very important as well for drought resilient and prepared Africa. So that's generally what we have done for the strategic document in the white paper, which is published, by the way, June last year by WMO, FAO, and UNCCD. So if you need, I think you can get the slides, and there's a link that you can download the details of this strategic document if you need to download. And so how do we implement is one which is very important and that we have emphasized in the ministerial discussion is the political will and leadership is very important. Initial investment, as I mentioned, is very important in building greater institutional capacity and sustainable development. Collaborative environment, and so also one country should also learn from the other and exchange lessons learned in order to address drought risk management and disaster and to reduce the impact of drought. And also engaging and supporting citizens and stakeholders are very, very important in order to have a doable and pragmatic strategy. And also engaging research community, including higher education, institution, and strong outreach and media are very important. And most importantly, the one theme that we wanted to hammer in that was an African solution should be there for Africa. And so we can learn from the other outside world, but African solutions should be really very important to address this. And what I'm going to give you in the remaining few minutes is, okay, we have this strategy at a higher level. We can have those planning, preparedness, and if you remember, I just mentioned those three pillars. And they do need some kinds of tools in order to implement. One is drought monitoring tools, drought prediction tools. And so in order to do that, there are several activities and research to develop these drought monitoring tools that we have been doing. And one is the NASA-funded, the Greater Horn of Africa project. And in this, actually, what we try to do is to address both drought and flooding, both as climate extremes. And I can show you one of the tools that we have developed, and which is called Vegetation Outlook for the Greater Horn of Africa. And this actually, the concept started actually here based on the VegOut for the central United States. And we had a very good experimental product, and so we implemented that and introduced it for Africa. And this tool integrates the satellite data, climate data, and also oceanic indices that for El Nino and La Nina condition to see the sea surface temperature as well. And we put them together using data mining techniques and developed a vegetation outlook that predicts up to 3 months. And so this is the vegetation condition, and I can show you some of the results. And for example, here in the top left corner, that's the condition at the beginning, before the forecast. And the 4 palettes show the prediction, 10 days, 1 month, 2 months, and 3 months. And the middle palette shows you the actual observation of the vegetation condition. And you can see the R squared, or the accuracy for 10 days is really great, 0.98. And for 1 month, it is 0.9. above 0.9, and for 2 months, 0.7, and for 3 months, 0.57. So this is encouraging results. It doesn't mean that this is perfect, because we have to evaluate this with other ancillary data in order to use, for example, for food security, comparing these results with crop yields. And so that is actually work in progress that we have been doing in order to have a convergence of evidence, in order to have an efficient model or monitoring and prediction tools for Africa. And this also could go into the strategic document so that you can decide when you have drought plan and what threshold it should be considered emergency, for example, and so on and so forth. And these products also can be helpful for decision making, before the drought impact kills several millions of people. The other one is actually the Water for Food Institute funded seed projects that we have done, and the UNL team that includes Drs. Mammo, Willis, Tadesse, myself, and Bayena and Ragasa. And we have been working in Ethiopia. And what we did in this one is we identified 2 drought-prone areas, and then made a survey to get some kinds of background based data sets so that we can compare what impacts it would have made. And here in this, actually, what we did is East Hararghe and South Wallo in Ethiopia, and we collected data in 2011, 10, 11, and 15. And both sites are drought prone, as I mentioned, and food insecure. And so in these areas, what we did is actually, we made a kind of a survey. That survey, in that survey, we did 351 households, 351 households, and we did this for at different elevation, highland, the midland, and lowland, so that we can get the basic data sets in order to compare, and and also to understand the needs of the people. In the 3 types of data sets that we collected in the survey is production, crop production, nutrition and health, and also anthropometric data sets. And so some of the details on these are published data sets, journal article we have published a few weeks ago. Dr. Marta Mammo, after this session, would present it. If anyone interested, you can attend her presentation. And the other thing which is very important that we have a lesson learned is involvement of the community. And participatory research is really has a very big impact on our model development, evaluation, and also could help for implementation. And one thing that we have done here in Ethiopia is we consulted them, and we shouldn't give them a prescription. This is best for you. If you really listen, what I learned is they have indigenous knowledge that no expert can have. And that's very important if we include this indigenous knowledge, the traditional knowledge, with the state-of-the-art technology and the satellite data and others that we integrate and develop the models. Those are very good, but listening to them and putting that together could make it more efficient and also sustainable down the road. So that's something that we have learned in this. And in the summary, I don't go to detail because Dr. Mammo is going to present that. But what we observed in actually here is high incidence of malnutrition, especially among children. And that's really risking the fate of the children, and the number of deaths can just go up. So addressing that could really help. And in general, of course, that's what we have identified is the water is a limited factor for agricultural production, and as I mentioned, in those drought-prone areas, the water level might be very close, and it's possible to have irrigation. And we know many of the women and children are going for hours to fetch water. It's a daunting task. And what we did actually is another seed project with Water for Food Institute that we did is we tried to do a treadle pump and also dig in and a simple manual treadle pump. And that was very, very important. And that had a very big impact, at least for the short term. And we did drilling and casing, installing and maintenance of pumps, and in collaboration with IDE, I don't know how to do this irrigation aspect of it, or treadle pump, and I don't have the experience. But I was considering the climate aspect, and as a drought expert, I was just trying not only explain about the climate and things, rather I was learning from the indigenous people. And so one thing that we learned from that is these kinds of approach, it should be holistic. A climatologist cannot do it by himself or herself. Instead, a holistic approach from economists, nutritionists, and other people, other experts should come together in order to address the drought issue. And in this case, actually, and we try to irrigation as a short-term solution. It can be scaled up, and we had 38 pumps that we have drilled. And what we saw from that is, the very interesting thing is, the farmers saw how it's been done, and then they try to adapt that and produce or manufacture their new tools using whatever the resource that they have, and just use the technology, the techniques that IDE experts showed them how to build the treadle pump. And the other thing which we learned in this one is, I mentioned that closing the gap, and the women were very, very much happy to do this. And then one female farmer just mentioned, I can do this, and I can do it better than anyone. Because usually in this one, there is financing, and they take credit, and the women pay their credit faster and produce more than what's been observed from the male farmers. And so that's a kind of a tradition, because the women have more responsibilities for the family. That could be it. And further investigation should be done from the social aspect. I'm not a social scientist. I don't know much about it. But as I mentioned, considering the social, economic, and other impacts also should be considered, and experts should come together to work on this. So I just jumped this one, and the future activities to finalize implementation of this strategic document is very important, as we think. In order to implement it, really the local governments should start it, and not after the drought happens, but adapting and developing a national drought plan for each government is really preferable, and that would help to be prepared for drought in Africa, and then saves millions of people. And in collaboration with the local people, international and national scientists, we pursue research on agricultural drought monitoring, crop productivity assessments, and also the other thing which I didn't emphasize is health vulnerability. Those are really very important to be addressed in the context of Africa and for the local people. As somebody was mentioning this morning, Africa is not just only one country. It's about 54 countries, and probably more than twice the size of the United States. So that's really big, and so they should be considered as at a local level, at a regional level, and a continental level. And also countries to countries should exchange experiences and knowledge so that they can address the drought issue. So the other thing which I can emphasize is importance of indigenous knowledge, supported and helped and improved by the state-of-the-art of technology. Satellite data, climate data, and other biophysical data also can be used to build a more efficient drought monitoring and prediction tools. And we know the data problem is really a big challenge in Africa, we know, as we know. But this state-of-the-art of technology like satellite data or remote sensing technology and geospatial technology is helping us in order to address that, even though we need some kinds of ground evaluation in order to better use this satellite data. And with that, I'll stop it here, and thank you for your time.